Need to dial up my buddy Greg Cosell of NFL Films. He does the podcast with me every Wednesday on the 104.5 The Zone network of podcasts, as well as the YouTube channel. Greg, buddy, I know it's a little earlier than you're used to me dialing you up, but I thought that this was a big enough deal for us to tell people together about a very special thing that we have going on for the live show on Friday, May the 3rd at the Analog Hotel. I hope I haven't bothered you this afternoon.
Well, Buck, I'm in a coat and tie, but amazingly enough, it's actually not for you. We shot the matchup show today, so I had to get dressed up. So I didn't want you to think that I did this just for you.
No, you look very dapper. I look like a slob next to you on camera right now for people watching on Zone TV. But yes, the NFL matchup show, of course, on ESPN, where you can see Greg, Sal Powell, and Darius Butler breaking it down every Sunday. Is this a draft? Before we get into the announcement,
draft show, yes, and actually, so people know, we air. Tomorrow night, Thursday, is our first airing, 7 p.m. on ESPN2. We shot it today, and if I do say so, it went really, really well. It was a good show.
It's always a great show on the NFL Matchup Show. It is gospel for you to get your NFL week and now draft started, so you can check that out on ESPN2, as Greg mentioned. So, Greg, before we make this announcement together, the live show last year with you and me and a couple hundred Titans fans in attendance, even Slay up there chopping it up before we got the thing going, that went as well as I could have possibly imagined. I know you and I have talked about this, but just such a great event, and the interaction I know you particularly enjoyed.
I really did. It was a lot of fun. I don't know how long we anticipated going when we started, Buck, but it went 3 hours. And I kind of felt we could have gone longer. People were not leaving. And we had a really, really good time. It was a great venue at the Hutton Hotel in their analog room. So really, it was so much fun. And really the fun is interacting with the fans because, look, you know how it is. I mean, you're in Nashville, and I know you'll be there for years to come. But, that's what it's all about. I mean, they're so excited about their team. They're very passionate about it. That's what being a fan is. And you just want to feed into that, and you really enjoy it.
Well, and they really enjoy you in particular, buddy. You're an institution in the NFL, and I know it's always uncomfy when people say nice things about you to your face and expect you to react to them on camera and stuff like that. But the Titans
Well, as long as I'm not going to be institutionalized, then we're okay. Yes.
Buddy, if you've done this podcast with me for 3 years without being institutionalized, I think you're going to be okay. But like Titans fans have really come to appreciate the specific attention that you pay to their team, Greg, which is why we do this, because this is not the Dallas Cowboys. This is not the New York Giants. That's not meant to denigrate the Tennessee Titans, but you just can't get this kind of in-depth analysis anywhere, which is why I know people gravitate to the podcast, they gravitate to your hits on 3HL, and why you've been so crucial to the Zone's programming for as long as you have, because this certainly transcends my time here.
Buck, I know you know this, and hopefully people listening, they probably know it as well, but I'll just say that, I grind away watching tape. When I do Titans radio and the podcast with you every single week during the season, I'm watching in detail the Titans tape. I'm watching their opponents tape as the season goes on. You get a feel for all their opponents, obviously the AFC South, which is really going to be a fascinating division this year. And I'm sure that will be part of our discussion next week as well, because the Titans don't play in a vacuum, obviously. By the way, something I wanted to mention, because I did the matchup show today, and obviously Darius Butler was on it, and he was in a golf foursome, I guess, a week or so ago. With Will Levis was in the foursome, and I asked him what he thought, and he said he was really, really impressed with the kid. He said he felt like he learned so much last year. He said as the season progressed, Levis told Darius that just the clarity with which I saw things really increased, and I really felt like I was beginning to really understand the NFL and what I'm seeing and how to play. So that struck me as a really optimistic statement. Obviously, you never know until we start playing the games, but one thing that everybody knows about Will Levis, I'm talking about people who coached him, people that have been around him, and I have talked to people who've coached him, is that he's very intense, he cares deeply, and he's going to work hard.
And that's certainly something. Greg Cosell of NFL Films here with us for a special announcement as we prepare for our live show Friday, May the 3rd at the Analog in the Hutton Hotel. The Will Levis analysis last year, we went in depth and we were helped, I think, by the Titans drafting a quarterback. It gave fans subject matter that they can really sink their teeth into. Not that Peter Skoronski isn't a sexy pick and certainly critical to the progress of the football team, but the growth and maturity of Will Levis, not just from a personal perspective, but from a football perspective, is something that I'm looking forward to getting into with you at this live show. And I think, Greg, that we need it. Not that you're not enough for me, bud. You and I embedded this relationship for a long time. You know that. But I think we need to. I think we need to up the ante for year 2. How do you feel about making an announcement with me here right now?
Sure. Go ahead. I'm waiting to hear what it is. I'm waiting to hear what the announcement might be.
So playing coy as Greg Cosell typically does. No, Rand Carthon, Titans general manager, is going to join Greg Cosell and myself on the stage to help us break down the draft class that 6 days prior he will have selected with him and his staff. Lucas, give me some crappy fanfare.
Let's ride.
Russell Wilson even excited about it. Greg, I know you had some time to talk to Rand.
I am so excited, by the way, to see, as I'm sure fans are, who they draft at 7, assuming they stay there. I just think there's so many options. I know it's easy to say they need an offensive lineman, and of course they do somewhere along the line. But, drafts play out in interesting ways, Buck, and you always have to stay true to your board, whatever that may look like. You and I will not see what the Titans board looks like, but obviously I have my thoughts about particular players, which I'm sure I'll be expressing on in 2 weeks, and we'll go from there. But I'm fascinated to see particularly their early picks, but pick 7 is really a prime spot.
Well, and just to get the perspective of the general manager who's going about the team building in today's NFL, Greg, I know those are questions that you're going to want to dive into with him, but to be able to have Rand's voice on it in particular, as he takes on this effort, it's a congested division, the AFC South. We've seen the moves that the Texans and the Jaguars and the Colts have made, and the Titans trying to be as competitive as humanly possible in 2024. I think that discussion is going to be fascinating in particular, and I think that Titans fans, the ability to ask Rand and you questions on the stage, it's going to be a great night, a lot of fun, specifically for Titans fans. Hell, I think we're even the envy of places like Buffalo, where I know you're a regular, because they saw the live show and they want to get a little piece of Greg Cosell too.
Well, unfortunately, there's a little too much of me to go around these days. That's why, I can't wait to get back to the gym, Buck. It's another week I'll be back at the gym, and then hopefully there'll be a little less of me.
Well, I could always use more Greg Cosell in my life. 1045thezone.com is where you go to get these tickets. Rand Carthon, Greg Cosell. I'll try not to bog down the proceedings too much up there with a cast of hundreds at the Analog in the Hutton Hotel on Friday, May the 3rd. Lucas will do us the courtesy of dropping the ticket in the ticket link in the live stream chat for those of you who are streaming online with us. Greg, why don't we talk some ball since you're here? Do you mind?
Sure. Got a few minutes. I'm watching tape now, but yeah, sure. I'll talk a little ball. Okay.
So inside linebacker is a need for the Tennessee Titans. And I just 1,000-foot view, because they did add Kenneth Murray in free agency.
Yep.
I wonder what, and not to put you on the spot here, because I didn't mention that we are going to talk about Kenneth Murray, but do you have any thoughts on the addition of Kenneth Murray right now to this defense? Understanding what he was in L.A., that it wasn't a perfect fit and that things didn't exactly go to plan under Brandon Staley.
Yeah, and obviously you don't know all the details, because neither you nor I are there, as he's being coached and specifically what he's being asked to do. But I remember studying him in detail when he came out of Oklahoma, and for those who may remember, he was in the same draft class as Patrick Queen, and I actually liked his tape more than Queen's. And when I say I liked his tape, I liked the player more because he's bigger, he was faster. Queen has turned out to be a better pro, and there's always so many variables, and maybe I was just wrong. That's possible. But Murray is a physical specimen. He's big, he can run. Maybe being with a new system, being coached, new voices in his head. We'll see, but Kenneth Murray has talent, and it was an interesting signing. Probably around the league, it was kind of an under the radar signing because he certainly wasn't one of those free agents that everybody was talking about. Those first couple of days, but assuming he can play to what I always felt his highest level could be, he's a really intriguing player because he's big and he can run.
Well, and who they pair him with in the Titans' base defense, and we're not entirely sure what the Titans' base defense is going to look like just yet under Denard Wilson. But there are a couple of intriguing prospects for the Titans to potentially explore. How do you view this off-ball linebacker class before we start talking about specific prospects? Where do you see the strengths and what are the weaknesses?
Again, I wouldn't say it's a great one in terms of, players where you go, wow, that guy, you really have to get that guy. And I think as there always is at a given position, there's different flavors. I could easily make the argument that Edgerrin Cooper is the most explosive, most dynamic, stacked backer off the ball linebacker in this draft class, but he's probably not as a first year player, a full-time starter. He's dynamic, athletic, explosive. I'm not sure he can necessarily play in your true base defense if you're playing, against an offense that's going to line up in base and run the football. I think he'll need work there. He'll get there in my view, but that's not who he is. Junior Colson from Michigan is probably the most complete in terms of being able to line him up. Certainly in your base, probably could play in some sub. I think he'll be a really solid pro. Like, I don't sense that he'll be a great player. He reminds me of players like Jermaine Pratt, like Zaire Franklin, who's with Indianapolis. Players that have done very well in the league, but you wouldn't necessarily say they're impact game-changing players. But you always need those kinds of players at linebacker. You have Peyton Wilson, who's a really intriguing guy because of his size and his length and the speed that goes with that. And I got an opportunity to talk with him at the Maxwell dinner in Atlanta this year, and he's a really impressive kid. I guarantee that he blows everybody away with interviews and just the kind of person he is. You've got a Cedric Gray at North Carolina. I mean, there's players to choose from. They're just not players you would draft in the first round. And again, obviously that wouldn't happen anyway, unless the Titans were to move way, way back. But they're not first round types, but some of them are going to be really solid pros.
Well, and to your point about Zaire Franklin and Jermaine Pratt, who you brought up, the way that they're used within their respective defenses, the positions that the coaching staff puts them in, I think just knowing their personnel and maximizing the ability of what they're able to do is such a critical part of this. And that's the thing that I think has most Titans fans just fascinated about what the Titans defense is going to look like under Denard Wilson. Greg, I know you've talked a lot about the Ravens on both sides of the ball, but the idea that Denard Wilson is going to have three good to, in the case of L'Jarius Sneed last season, great corners to work with, the secondary, how much burden can that take off of what you'll have at every other level of the defense, and how much better can they be as a result?
Well, there's two parts to that question in a sense. Number one, Denard Wilson was with Philadelphia before he was with Baltimore.
Right. And
Philly's base was a 5-man front, a 5-2. Baltimore's was not. So we're not exactly sure yet, and maybe we'll know. I guess they're starting OTAs, and maybe some will get a sense of what he plans on doing with his base defense. But getting to the larger question of the secondary, I think if you speak to most coaches around the league, and I've had these conversations, you can always scheme pressure, Buck, but it's really hard to cover up bad corner play. And now that they will not have bad corner play because Sneed is arguably a top 5 corner in the league, and Awuzie is a very solid player. And they're both physical players. And I think that's really important in this era of the NFL and the evolution of the passing games, where there's a lot more quick game. The ball comes out quicker, so the pass rush, and I'm talking about in normal down and distance. Obviously, when it's 3rd and 9, everything's different. But I'm talking about just general pass game, 1st and 10, 2nd and 5, where everything tends to be quicker. and it's very difficult to truly pressure the quarterback. So how do you disrupt the passing game? You have to disrupt the passing game by disrupting receivers and their routes. And a part of that is the ability to play press. And Snead, we know, is a press animal. We've seen that. And Awuzie is a big kid. I mean, I don't have his measurables in front of me, but he's probably in the 6'1", 200 range, I would guess.
Yeah.
So now you have two physical corners that can line up and play press and can disrupt routes. And you know what? Those guys get beat once in a while. It's the NFL. That happens. But, I think that that's a really important element to what their defense could possibly become.
I want to take it back to a prospect specifically, Greg. You mentioned Junior Colson. Obviously, locally, we're aware of Junior Colson.
Yeah, he's from the Nashville area, yep.
Having played his high school ball here by way of Haiti and then ultimately going to Michigan, where he won the championship last year. As you you mentioned him being one of the more, if not the most complete of the top prospects at inside linebacker. What are kind of the pros and cons of his game specifically to you beyond the ones that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think he's kind of an efficient reactor. Most of his tackles came as kind of a scrape and flow linebacker beyond the first level of the defense. He's much more of a read and react player than a dynamic playmaker. He's not a quick trigger guy or a sudden mover, but he just has really good length, really good size. I thought that he covered ground easily, at times effortlessly. He's an excellent tackler, and that's often overlooked these days, Buck. I mean, we talk about when guys are not good tacklers, but we don't talk about when guys are good tacklers. And he's a good tackler. I think he's one of the better linebacker prospects in this draft. And I made the point in my notes that I thought he would become a quality starter at stacked linebacker relatively early in his career. He's just not at, again, the other factor to keep in mind is guys develop too. These are not finished products. So when I say that he wasn't an impact playmaker, that's not what he was on tape at Michigan. Does he have the traits possibly to become that? You could say he possibly does. I mean, he's got good size. He moves well. He's not a great athlete, but, and he didn't blitz very much. And based on that could be a function of the defense in which he played too. I mean, he didn't give you much as a blitzer based on tape, but again, is it because of him or because they had, 9 guys on defense at the combine?
Right.
The things you don't know. So you have to understand that there's a lot of variables involved, but just as a player, I wouldn't say he's an explosive, sudden, twitchy athlete, but he's just a really comfortable mover and a really good tackler. And I thought he was just a really solid player, which is why I mentioned the names, Pratt, Jordan Hicks is another name that came to mind watching him, Zaire Franklin, all good players who make a lot of tackles.
Greg Cosell of NFL Films is here with us on 104.5 The Zone. We're doing a live episode of The Install for you as we announce that Rand Carthon will participate in our live show coming up on May the 3rd at the Hutton Hotel, 6 days after the NFL draft class is concluded and the new Titans rookie class is put into place. Greg, we always, for people who have been following along with the podcast, throughout the course of the draft process, I always ask you at the end of the pod for a prospect who's made you put on more of their games, whose tape you've dove a little deeper into after having spent more time initially watching them. Is there an off-ball linebacker prospect that comes to mind?
Oh, boy. I've been watching a lot of tape, and I'm trying to think, is there an off-ball linebacker prospect? Hold on.
I can buy you some time, Greg. I'm a pro.
Give me a minute here.
I got 3 hours a day that's basically just that people just accuse me of stalling for 3 hours a day, so I'm happy to do that.
Chat for a moment. I'll tell you, I just have to see. I've probably seen now about 130 guys in detail. So.
That's no problem at all. While you do that, I'll tell people that 104.5 The Zone.
I got to see the list, and then I'll be able to tell you if there's someone that really, I felt like, wow, that's he's not going to be for everyone, but I really like Jeremiah Trotter a lot. But he's 6 feet tall, and there'll be some teams that say 6 feet tall. He does not meet the critical factors for us as a linebacker. I do not know how Rand Carthon feels. Obviously, if they don't draft him, we're not going to have that conversation. But, I really liked his tape a lot. I kind of felt that you could almost make the argument to me that his tape was as good as any of the stacked backers, but I understand the limitations. So, I don't want to sit here and say, I don't want people to come away from this thinking that, I'm saying Jeremiah Trotter is Ray Lewis, but I just really liked his tape. I like the way he plays. He sees things so fast. He's got great key and diagnose. He's aggressive. Just really like the way he played. And he's a really good blitzer. But, he's 6 feet, and there'll be some teams that just say, well, that's too small. And I don't know how Rand Carthon and his staff feel, but, I think that, and by the way, there's always exceptions, obviously, with players who, one of them just went into the Hall of Fame recently, and Zach Thomas. And I'm not making a direct comparison, but I mean, obviously, Zach Thomas was not a high draft pick because he was under 6 feet, and he turned out to be a Hall of Fame linebacker.
All first team All ACC last year at Clemson, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Greg Cosell, kind enough to spend some time here with us. Greg, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day. I know you're busy. Make sure people check out the special edition of the NFL Matchup Show coming out tomorrow. Is that 7 Eastern, Greg?
7 Eastern, yes, I should say that because you're not Eastern time. 7 Eastern tomorrow night, Thursday night on the 18th, and that's 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. It's a pretty fine focus show because I just want people to understand we don't do mocks, we don't make lists. We kind of talked about the NFL as it is, and the fact that it's likely that 7 or 8 of the first 10 picks could be quarterbacks and receivers. So we kind of focused more on the fact that hey, the league's about explosive pass plays now, and normally it's quarterbacks and receivers that make them.
It took the Titans long enough to get there, but certainly we're expecting to talk a little bit of that at the live show with Greg and Rand Carthon in attendance. Greg, thank you as always. I know you're excited, and I know Titans fans are excited to get in front of you, ask you guys some questions with the best Titans offseason breakdown around on Friday, May the 3rd. Thank you, buddy.
All right, Buck. Thanks. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it.